Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Mind Over Matter for December 17th, 2015. I sure hope everybody's prepared for the holiday season. I know I am mostly. Um, the season always sort of comes up on you pretty quickly, doesn't it? It before you know it, it's here. And I think for a lot of us, when Christmas falls on and that is for those of you, of course, that are celebrating Christmas. I know that there are many people who do not. Um, I have many a friend who are not uh, people who would celebrate Christmas per se. Um, so I respect that, but at the same time, I mean, it's hard to not be impacted by the season, regardless, because it's all around you. Um, but when the holiday season does fall on a Friday, it kind of throws things for a loop because I think people don't realize that tomorrow is literally the last Friday before Christmas. So if in fact that's news to you, I hate to break it to you, but you're running out of time. So today my topic, and I've done this topic before, but I haven't really done it in this vein before. And quite frankly, uh, I heard this in I was listening to a talk about someone, or I was listening to a talk by someone who was referring to the concept of choice. Um, and although sometimes I think that people may not relate choice to mindset, and just, well, I know for sure that a lot of times people take the concept of choice for granted. Um, we should be extremely grateful for the ability to make choices. We live in uh, a world where not everybody does have that benefit. We certainly are the only creature on the planet that has the ability to make choices. Animals, all other animals on the planet are living through a concept called instinct. They make all of their choices based on instinct. Pardon me, they don't even make choices. Or let me rephrase that. They take action based on instinct, whereas humans take action based on choice. So it's an amazing thing, and I think that for most of us, we don't realize how many choices we make throughout the day. It's as simple as, when that alarm goes off, do you get out of bed? Do you close your eyes? Do you open your eyes? Do you jump out of bed? Do you get dressed right away? Do you go to the washroom first? Do you take a shower right away? Do you, and many people have different morning routines. I know I work from home, so my routine's different than someone who has to get up and go to an office. Someone who gets up to go to an office, a shower might be their very first thing. But do they go to the bathroom before they take their shower? Like, I don't know. Like, it's. But these are all little subconscious choices that we all make involuntarily, subconsciously. They just happen, regardless of whether any thought is put into it. There is a choice. Although you may get up every morning and take a shower before you go to work, it's still a choice. Many people say, well, no, you have to take a shower before you go to work. No, actually, you don't. There's no rule or law or any of those things. You can get up, roll out of bed, get dressed, get in your car, go to work. That is the least amount of choices you can make on a morning when you want to go to work. When your eyes open, you get out of bed immediately, get dressed immediately, and that is, of course, the clothes that you're going to wear are already laid out, so you don't have to choose that. So open your eyes, roll out of bed, or swing your feet off the bed, get dressed, go straight downstairs, get in your car, downstairs because I have my bedroom's upstairs, so leave the bedroom, go straight to your car, grab your coat and your jacket, your shoes, whatever, go straight to your car, and go straight to work. That's not to say about all the choices you made while you were driving. or riding the bus or whatever it is that you're doing to get to work. Oh, notice I didn't mention the breakfast. Again, choices. We're inundated with choices. Inundated with choices. And sometimes it can become overwhelming. And I think a really, really important thing to keep in mind on those days when things are so challenging that you just don't want to make any more choices is that you're being challenged for a reason, and it's for growth. The quote that I wanted to keep, or that I am keeping in mind, and that I took away from this conversation that I had with, or not conversation, sorry, this talk that I was a part of. The quote is, "There is no middle ground." And let me tell you, that was quite a monumental phrase in the entire talk that I was listening to. There is no middle ground. This person referred to choices as, every time you're faced with a challenge, you have the ability to go right, to go left, to go right straight down the middle, or stay where you are. One of the other things she had said was standing still is equal to dying, which I also found fascinating, because it when you think about it and spend some time evaluating what that phrase means, it's essentially 100% true, especially if you're someone who is looking for more. Now, don't get me wrong. If you think your life is perfect in every way, or just maybe not in every way, but in most ways, and you just enjoy the subtlety of the life that you lead, by all means, the phrase standing still is like dying may not apply. But for anybody, and I would suspect that anyone who's listening to this video, or this webinar, pardon me, anybody who's listening to this webinar, you have much more drive and much more invested in things moving forward, changing, evolving, growing, becoming better at. Therefore, standing still is like dying. I'm one of those people. I'm not really a big fan of stagnant lifestyle. I'm not one that enjoys things to be exactly the same day in and day out. I like variety. I like things to change. I like to be challenged, even when it pushes me to the limits that I don't even think I can handle. I have no problem with that. The problem I generally have is when I'm pushed to these challenge points and left to my own devices to sink or swim. I find that for those that want to challenge others to their point of breaking, you are doing yourself and the person you're challenging a complete disservice if you're not prepared to follow through. And follow through may take longer than you expected. What do I mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is that at times, following through with challenging people to their breaking point means that you may have to invest more time in their growth than you had anticipated. And if you're not prepared to be on that side of the equation, then you shouldn't be on the other side of it. I myself challenge people to their utmost limits. I do it often, and in some cases, it comes across, and I've heard this feedback, it comes across as aggressive. I've heard it come across as opinionated. I've heard it come across as what's a good word that I can't, what's a word that I've heard before? Arrogant, that's a word I've heard before, which is so not even remotely close to the truth. I do believe that sometimes arrogance is a very perceived arrogance, we'll call it that. Perceived arrogance is very much uh, a defense mechanism for insecurity. So what I also in my specific case, when I'm in this position of challenging people to their core, trying to force them to think of things in a certain way and think about life or their situation differently, I will admit I will push that envelope hard, say things that perhaps nobody else was willing to say, challenge them to a point where the pushback will either teach me that I have the wrong perspective or teach me that they were ready for growth. And in some cases, it puts me in a position where I don't, people just don't like me. It's not really, I'm not overly concerned if people do not understand my methodologies, because I know personally that where it's coming from is genuine, authentic, and real. Under no circumstance do I ever want to hurt anybody or uh, piss anybody off. Although pissing people off to a point where they actually break through, I'm okay with. Um, what I also find interesting is that there have been people in my life who I pushed, and then they've disappeared to a certain degree, only to circle back and be quite thankful and grateful for that push. And when I say circle back, that's the second half of that follow-up, where I'm not going anywhere. I may push you to the point of breaking and challenging you to grow, but I'm also willing to stand lockstep with you while you go through the challenge, if you'll let me. And this is where, when the phrase "there is no middle ground" came rushing into my mind, and it was almost like a big, huge rubber stamp right there in the top of my head, and it made me stop and think. There is no middle ground, because that's where everybody wants to live, right? And I'm a big proponent of the concept of uh, mastering the gray area. I'm a big proponent of the concept of black and white is not a healthy way to approach a project, or approach a concept, or approach there's a gray area that must be mastered in order to facilitate. But let's be honest, if you've mastered the gray area, that means you understand the white and you understand the black. Because in order to make gray and all the different variations of gray, you need to know how much extreme right and extreme left to add. So in order to master the middle ground, you need to be able to take a little bit from the right, take a little bit from the left, and be able to mix the two in varying. Maybe you need 80% left and 20% right. Maybe you need 1% left and 99% right. Or maybe you need 49-51, or whatever million variations there are. Not million, but whatever variations there are in between, right? So, having said all of that, when that phrase "there is no middle ground" came up, I'm thinking, well, no, there is middle ground. That's where. And then as I listened to the talk a little further, I realized what the concept is referring to is when it comes time to make that decision. Am I going left? Am I going right? Am I going straight ahead? That's the place where there is no middle ground. There is no gray area. You have to make a decision. And I mean, I know this concept in principle, because making a decision is the only way to move forward, right, left, or straight ahead. But the only way to move in the direction that you want to go is by making a decision. That ambiguous place of that ambiguous place of not knowing what you're going to do can drag on for, sometimes in some cases, a decade. And that may seem extreme to some people, but there's people who have wandered aimlessly for a decade before they finally get their act together. I could vouch for myself in my aimless wandering, has cost me a lot of time in my life. Have I had successes in my life? Of course I've had successes, because I have such a drive for, doing a great, for doing good things, and an ethical and moral uh, constitution to bring my best to the table. So that does produce results, and it produces success. Has all of my success and or failure been in the right direction? No, not always. Because when faced with possible choices, I can make a perfect, before I made the leap to working from home, before I made the leap of working solely for myself, before I made that leap, I faced a very I faced a very big decision right at the sort of apex of this whole thing, and right at the apex of, I guess, a point in life where I had been laid off from a couple of different places through in the IT industry. Um, I had worked a term position, and finally that term had ended. I now needed work. I was, and at this moment, I ended up with three opportunities. Three. So one of them was in the health and fitness industry, on the heels of my transformation, if you will, in that led me to potentially going down the path of, um, ironically, it's three, by the way, because we just finished talking about right, left, and straight ahead. So there's an irony. I would say that the health and fitness and the personal trainer choice would have been uh, a straight ahead choice, because it was something I was already sort of doing personally with my own health. Two, there was a management position at a company uh, in a field that I'd never, ever done or considered doing. But the management and leadership skills that I had afforded me the opportunity to be offered a job. But it was in a field I was unfamiliar with. Let's call that right. Now the other one it's basically along the same vein as number two, which was, it was in the same field, and I had friends that were. So this was company A, which is an independent company. The other one was a government run company of the same, a government run version of the first company, but it was a very much a lesser position, like an entry level position. Um, but with my experience and that it would be, I'd quickly climb up the ladder, so to speak. So that would be left. Now, faced with these three, one of them I was super scared of. Well, all of them had their elements of fear. One, I never wanted to work for the government, so there's fear. Two, the other one was in a field that I knew nothing about, so I would be starting all over again. And the other one was in the health and wellness, which, although I had a lot of working knowledge because of where I had come from, the fear factor was, who would want to listen to what I had to say? Who would be willing to take advice from me? And that fear factor, believing in myself, was the fear. And that was the largest of the three fears, and the one that I ran away from. And I ended up going right, which was the private company management position. And the job was good. I enjoyed it. It wasn't in line with my core principles, values, and direction that I wanted to take. So it's a number of years later, and I in the last 3 or 4 months, I've done plenty of reflection, and I realized that there was an opportunity for me to actually move in the direction of the dreams and goals and visions that I've had for my life, and I chose to not do it based on fear. I kind of went to the middle ground. Pardon me, I kind of stood still. I didn't go to, there was no middle ground. Middle ground meant they stayed unemployed. I mean, and that's not even middle ground. That's a choice too. So that's why the phrase when she said it resonated so strongly with me, because there is no middle ground. Even standing still or staying in the same career or staying on the same path, it's not middle ground. It's a choice. You chose to take path A. You got three choices: A, B, or C. And you either choose, let's call them, A. B is going to be straight ahead, because in A and B, A and C can be right or left, depending on how you want to look at it. And staying straight ahead, even though most people will consider that middle ground because it's down the middle, and it means you're probably going to do things in line with what you're already doing. But instead of middle ground, it's not, or pardon me, instead of considering that middle ground or a compromise, it's not. It's a choice. It's a full-on choice to either A, run away from the fears you're facing in B and C, or A and C, sorry, or that those two choices aren't attractive enough for you to veer off course. But it's still a choice. There is no middle ground. Right? And we're saying, well, we need to find middle ground. No, we need to make a choice and move in this direction. You see this all over the place. You see it with government. You see it with the landscape of the world we live in, with the political correctness of the world, that everything has to be perfectly correct so we don't piss this person off or piss that person off or upset this one or upset that one. The fact remains is that this world of political correctness has created an environment where everybody's striving to be in the middle ground, but that doesn't exist. Take a valley, for instance. There's no middle ground. It's air. There's right, left, or straight down the middle, but in a direction. There's no middle ground. We call it middle because you're going between right and left, but you're not standing still there. There's no middle ground. It's a choice to move straight ahead. That choice often is the poorest of the three. Often, not always. Provided it is in line with what your hopes, dreams, and goals are, then it's obviously the right choice. But I know from personal experience, moving in directions that are directly opposed to my hopes, dreams, and desires, and what direction I want to move. I know that I have made some choices that are not in line with that, which meant I went in the wrong direction. I think that this concept of there is no middle ground needs to be a paramount value that everybody puts into their psyche immediately. Write it on the wall, write it on your hand, write it on your arm, tattoo it on your forearm. There is no middle ground. You have to make a choice. Sometimes the choices are so subtle we don't even realize we're making a choice. And therefore, we find ourselves in a position where we think that we're in the middle ground. You're not. You made a choice to not do. You've made a choice to do nothing. That's the big deal. You made a choice to do nothing. I fear that most people find themselves in a position like that, thinking that they've made that middle ground choice. No, you didn't make a middle ground choice. You chose to do nothing. That's it. Well, guys, I think that I'm going to wrap this up with the concept that I need you all to be, I need you all to challenge yourselves on a daily basis to be grateful for your ability to choose, your ability to make choices. Stop unconsciously making choices on a day-to-day basis and pause for a moment to understand the choices that you've actually made to get where you are. Because the fact remains is that every single day you're making choices. And here's the kicker, and I'm going to leave you with this. If you are unhappy with any portion of your life, until you take ownership of the fact that you are there based on choices that you've made in the past, you will have the inability to change the course of your life. If you want to move from unhappy to happy, it will require making different choices than you currently make on a day-to-day basis. I'm not talking about big, massive, sweeping change and huge choices like, which car to buy or when should I sign my new mortgage. I'm talking about the little subtle choices, the tiniest, smallest, incremental changes that add up to create positive change. And if you have no capacity for understanding that it was the small, insignificant choices that you've made in your life up to this point that has created the world that you either A, love, B, hate, or C, tolerate, then you are faced with the inability to change any of that. So as we close out this year, and this will be the last Mind Over Matter for 2015, I would challenge you to reflect on how grateful you are for the changes or for the choices you have and the ability to make those choices every single day. And evaluate which choices you've made that have brought you to where you are. And if there's anything about where you are that you don't like, understand that you have the power and you have the ability to make a choice that will change that area of your world. Have a great holiday season, everyone. Talk to you soon. My name is Jamie, and we will see you in 2016.